Morning. Take it away, Daniel.
Hello, and thanks for all of you who came to listen to my talk. And for those of you who didn't know you were signing up for getting me, I apologize. But hopefully I'll make your evening a lovely time. I am going to be speaking on the most chipper topic of how we are often alone together in the digital world as a result of how our brains connect with one another's. Can you all see my screen okay? Thumbs up, excellent.
Yes.
So this is a redux of a talk that I gave at Turing to my fellow students. At Turing, there's a heavy emphasis on training new software developers to be a diverse, inclusive group of people coming into the tech industry to transform it. And this was a topic that I gave in that vein of something that I care about, that I believe is relevant to how we bring together our ethics and our software development. So on that note, let's jump into it. I want to make the preface that I have some training as a community leader and a nonprofit leader, and some minor training in counseling, which has had some overlap with psychology and counseling issues, but I'm not a neuroscientist. And I probably shouldn't even put that word in this talk, as I feel like it raises expectations far beyond what I'll be able to meet tonight. But what I do have is some lessons from neuroscience that are being applied in many different fields. And I wanted to apply those to my new industry of software development. My background, again, is in a lot of different industries, in education, in nonprofit leadership, and I think it's going to come out in where I take this, as you'll see. But being a software developer is new, thanks to Turing. So the problem that I'd like to bring to our attention is a loneliness epidemic, which has massive mental and physical health impact on individuals. So not only is it experientially miserable, but it's also causing a health epidemic. Here are some quotes from a Cigna study in around 2018. People scoring 43 and above were considered lonely. The average loneliness score in America is 44. 54% of respondents said they always or sometimes feel that no one knows them well. 56% reported that sometimes or always they felt like the people around them are not necessarily with them. 2 in 5 felt like they lack companionship, that their relationships aren't meaningful, and that they are isolated from others. And not only that, but loneliness has been linked with a higher risk of coronary heart disease and stroke, and shown to influence our genes and our immune system, and even recovery from breast cancer. And studies have found that it is a predictor of premature death, not just for the elderly, but even more so for younger people. Quotes taken from an NPR article about this study that I encourage you to take a look at. Some of the things that the study found were really fascinating. One was that social media usage had little positive or negative correlation in the Cigna study. I don't think that exonerates it. We're going to come back to that later, but it was very notable. But what was most notable was that what did correlate with improvement is frequent, meaningful, in-person interactions. And now here I have to apologize for bringing COVID-19 down upon us by speaking on this topic and uttering these words out loud. I wrote this actually before the quarantine set in. So this is going to feel like cruel irony to those of us who are still largely legally obligated to stay at home in most circumstances. But as we are leaving that, the importance of meaningful in-person interactions is becoming more and more something that we need to remember as it becomes increasingly an option. So why does in-person contact help with loneliness and social media usage? And there's some other factors that you can read in the study that were measured. Why does in-person contact help address loneliness when those others do not? Well, And here's where we get into some of the weeds, and I'm going to skip over a lot of details because I'm not a scientist, but communication is extremely multifaceted. It includes not only vocal communication, spoken communication, but a vast array of other more subtle forms of communication: body language, intonation, eye contact, physical distance, clothing, tone. It goes on. In addition to all those factors, which are hard to get across via digital media, it is also assisted by the human mirror neuron system, which debatably builds a mental model of other people's intentions and emotions based on observed physical cues. It helps us feel what others feel. These neurons are scattered throughout various systems in our brain, and they activate when watching someone else perform an action or move or do something with their body. Your brain not only constructs a simulation of what the other person might be feeling or thinking, but in some cases feels it with the same systems that you would feel as if you were experiencing that emotion yourself. There's a lot of debate about this. I did a lot of reading of obscure science, abstracts and so forth. But what does seem to be clear is that our brains are wired to empathize with people when we can see them in live time physically in a way that is difficult to replicate in the digital world. Sorry, trying to move around the Zoom windows on top of Keynote is a blast. The latency, limited sensory input, and asynchronous nature of most digital communication media conflicts with this way our brain connects or attunes with others. One study that I read pointed out that the asynchronous nature of most digital communication, that is, it's not perfectly in time with the other person you're communicating with, creates havoc with the way that our brain expects to and tries to read and interpret other people's signals. On top of which there are resolution issues. There are some details I can see about your face through a tiny Zoom box, and many that I cannot. And in addition to that, you can only see this part of me, and my whole body is wired to communicate through the way that I move and talk and engage with you. None of that's coming across, which is suggestive that digital media are not great for having real contact with other human beings in a way that gives you a sense that they are present with you. So I'm going to suggest some implications for us as software developers and some implications for us as remote workers. So first of all, for us as software developers, I'm going to bring in a lesson that I thought was really important from a talk at last month's Boulder Startup Week by Amy Butcher, Matt Waller, and Evelyn Gosnell. One point that came across really well in the talk was that when we are determining metrics of success as a development team, as a tech company, we should not and must not confuse process for outcomes. That is, how long a user engages with your application does not necessarily equate with a positive outcome for that user. It may be a goal for you because it is related to an outcome to increase user engagement with your platform, but they are not the same. And in many cases, the outcome for the user of being forced to remain on your app for a really long time might be against their wishes and against what would be a healthy outcome for them. So I would suggest that we consider a few things. Well, the first being the most controversial. I think we should consider whether your funding model, for example, ads, pushes you toward keeping users engaged longer than they intended or desired to, and without regard for what a successful outcome is for them. There's a lot of information on this. If you go to the Center for Humane Technology, this is the drum that they beat constantly, that there is a attention economy, and users of software that is ad-driven are being regularly abused by that system. Secondly, I would suggest to us that we resist encouraging compulsive, isolated media consumption, or at the very least to consider the effects of excessive engagement with a product as a moral issue, in the sense that we might not be able to claim innocence to say, well, the user chose to binge 20 hours of Star Trek, that was on them. But to think about knowing that it has health, mental and physical health impacts, to be away from people in person, that we may need to consider what users can do with our platforms. Some implications for us as remote workers are first that we compensate for lack of quality with quantity. This is something I came across in a talk that I heard at the Jamstack meetup, because I liked the topic of a talk, and even though I had no idea what the Jamstack was until a month later. Over communicate. In this era, we can acknowledge that our media are not great, and rather than rejecting the media, work within the media that we have, work within the constraints that we have, as Joel and I were just talking about before we started this meetup. If you can't get as much across through a Zoom call as you can in person, then be aware of those limitations and over-communicate in as many ways as you can to compensate for what's being missed. Secondly, compensate for lack of in-person time at work with in-person time elsewhere for your own mental and physical health. Get involved in your local community, volunteer, be a mentor, or find a hobby that people gather around in person. And on that note, I'm a little over time, but I want to take a moment for something that is a passion of mine. As Rylan just addressed, recent events are significant. I personally have had a really hard time thinking about anything else. I did not have time to retool this talk around a related subject, but I desire to strongly. Not being able to do that, I do want to address briefly one way that we as the Boulder Ruby group and developers in our community can support people of color and the increasing diversity of people in our industry. A theme that has become prominent for me over the past few weeks is the importance of listening to Black voices and other voices from perspectives and experiences different than our own. As I just spoke about, I think that that is best done in person, not only reading the words of people online who are different from us or watching videos of them, but having relationships with them in person so that you can experience empathy with that person. If we never see or be and spend time with people different from us, they remain other from us, which is at the root of so many of the evils at work in our society. Now, our professional network is just one of many social networks. So possibly you don't experience diverse relationships in your workplace, but you do elsewhere. But in our industry, we have a marked lack of diversity. The stats are real bad. The causes of that are legion, and they are complex. But I would like to recommend one simple way that we as members of this group can support that diversity through supporting education and mentoring relationships with people from underprivileged backgrounds. A couple ways that we can do so, I'm going to share on this next slide, which I'm going to return to. They are through my alma mater. If you'd like to support Turing's diversity scholarships, which support people of many diverse backgrounds, or the Joan Clark Society Scholarship, there's a link here through which you can do that. And furthermore, you can mentor, provide fellowships, or host job shadowing events for Turing students through that second link. If you only mentor people that you know who are within your relational network, then mentoring in our society and industry will continue to flow in its existing ruts, which is to say, down lines of privilege, relational and social privilege. I recommend that you, if you do choose to mentor a Turing student, which I highly recommend, there's a way to specify that you would like to, or interested in mentoring a Black, Indigenous, or person of color background student. And I think that if we do that as an industry, we will continue to make space for and become more hospitable to people from different backgrounds. With that, thank you very much. These are ways to get a hold of me. And I have some selected resources that I consulted. I have many more which are not listed. If you're interested in them, please feel free to reach out to me for those. Thank you for your time very much and for the opportunity.
Thanks, Daniel. It's also good to just sort of message or put a comment with those resources on the meetup. Super helpful as follow-up and for people who couldn't make it to get a semblance of what you're getting at.
Will do.
Great talk. Now, I guess we could do a quick break because if I need a break at all for a bathroom.
Or questions, if anyone has questions for Daniel.
I welcome them.
I'll come with a question for sure. So Daniel, when you suggested if you can't make, I mean, what, given the current situation we're in, what's the second best thing to like actually be able to talk to people in person? Is there a second best thing, or is it just like you got to find a way to have that in-person communication?
Yeah, and this is where thankfully our brain plasticity is on our side. It's not a on or off switch that we can't, it's not as if we can't experience empathy through people through digital media. It's just that as the resolution issues and the asynchronous issues and the the limitations of whatever format you're on degrade the quality of your connection to other people, but they don't remove it entirely. So as with over communicating in other ways, I would say overspending time with people is highly recommended, which is why I think that the idea of digital happy hours or virtual happy hours is such a great concept for keeping a team in relational contact with each other. But I would say that for our own physical and mental health, finding some way to connect with people in person, especially as we have more options now, is really valuable. And that might mean simply getting out and seeing other people walking around your neighborhood. It could be engaging in, getting out our front doors is helpful right now. But I am biased as a nonprofit leader towards saying that there are many, many organizations in our communities through which you can find relationships with people that you do not know and who are willing to meet you and who might need your help. So if you're looking for ways, a lot of those nonprofits are desperate right now for help, especially those who are looking for mentors, volunteers and supporters, particularly given all the things happening in our society right now. Getting involved would be a great way.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if you have like organizations, I've seen some float by in some publications, but if you have ones that are looking for help, I think it's good to share those. And even do it multiple times because it's easy to miss in like Slack channels and things. Yeah. Yeah, Joel is involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters, which is great. And I did that in San Diego. It's a really rewarding way to influence somebody directly. And you get to play Xbox and get your butt handed to you, I believe, by a 10-year-old remotely. Okay.
Does it feel better remotely to get whooped at Xbox, or does it still hurt?
Might hurt more. Joel will have to chime in on that one.
The problem I have is I get motion sickness when I play video games, so I feel like I have to vomit the whole time. But he really enjoys playing Minecraft with me, so it's totally worth it.
That's good. Thank you for your sacrifice of your belly. Oh,
It's a problem I didn't know I had.
yeah. Okay, well, if anyone needs a break, you can take one. But